Complacency is a terrible disease. It can happen to anybody. You get a little comfortable. You know, you've all had a relationship, or some of you are married, and you know how it was before you got married. The attempts on your significant other to wow you and to impress you, you know, as time goes by, they get less and less. And soon enough, after that familiarity really begins to take root, it's just the other individual can become as commonplace, can be taken for granted. There's a danger, there's a peril to familiarity. I remember Dr. Scott used to say, we tend to do more for the people we don't know or love versus the ones that we profess to love. We do more for strangers than we do for the people we say we love. And there couldn't be a greater truth most of the time. Being a child of God is a great privilege and also a great responsibility. I'm really going to try to keep myself together here when I talk about this, because this has been coming for the last couple of weeks, and I've been asking God, please help me. Not that I've not asked God previously, God help me, but God help me and give me the wisdom and the words to be able to communicate things that are important to you, God. I'm not interested if they're important to me. I'm interested, God, if they're important to you. And if they are important to you, open my mind to see them clearly and open my mouth that I may convey them with that same clarity. And so after the last couple of weeks, really about last week, it dawned on me there are a lot of people in this church that are in a somewhat backslidden condition. And all that means, it doesn't mean the end is near, it just simply means that it can happen to anybody. That thing that you once could not be kept away from is not that important anymore. Now, the problem is that a lot of times, as children of God, we forget our position. We forget our privilege. Those two things, forgetting our place, if you will, is probably one of the worst things that can happen to a believer. When you stop caring about the fact that you're no longer a child of the world, but you're a child of God, and I do indeed, it's shocking, but I still hear my late husband saying in at least a half a dozen, maybe a dozen messages, child of God, act like one. That's shocking. What does it mean to act like a child of God? Does it mean you put on the acts or the airs? No, it means as a child who needs guidance from a heavenly Father, who needs to have the hand of God to guide and to lead, and to not be so stiff-necked that you can't hear, receive. For some of you, it's take correction. Now, I'm just going to say a gratuitous sidebar that has nothing to do with my message. Maybe it does, but it's a sidebar. The worst thing that I have to deal with, not just in this church, but in the people that I may come in contact with who simply work for me, removed from the church, and individuals that I may encounter in my lifetime. People who will not bend, they will not receive correction, they cannot humble themselves. God can deal with anything except pride. Now, the sidebar there is, I have an incredible forgiving spirit, but I won't let somebody walk on the things of God, which includes me. I hate to say it, I just refer to myself as a thing. But I won't let people walk on the things of God or treat the things of God so casually, and then turn around and open their mouth and say, I'm a Christian. You need to learn what the definition of I'm a Christian means, not I do and I don't do. Christian, a little Christ, a follower of Christ. And if you're following Christ, by golly, you're going to know what's in this book. And you're going to figure out real quickly that there is a method with man out in the world that works with man called manipulation of the mind for greed, for power, for whatever it is that one quests after. And then there is the method, God's method with man, if you're interested in the plan of salvation and redemption and eternity. And the twain, the only crossroad that they meet in is the fact that I am this duality, flesh and spirit, not willing to take instructions and corrections from the Word of God means you are rebellious and can't be helped. I don't know why people even talk about the Bible or Christianity if you're not willing to take a look. Now, today's message encompasses both complacency and the consequences thereof. When people treat their calling with casualness, and the results that can be disastrous. And not only that, a message within the message, which is with God, it is important the way you do things. God's revealed himself to us through this book. So there is good reason to say that all Scripture is given for instruction, and take all Scripture to mean all Scripture. Now, I want us to start in Exodus 24. And while you're turning to Exodus 24, let me just say some background here. God chose Moses, and when Moses said he couldn't speak, he said essentially Aaron would be his mouthpiece, becoming the priest, and thence the priesthood is established with the sons of Aaron. And great privilege was given to these people. Specifically, if you think about it, Moses, Aaron, his sons. In the 24th chapter, we have Moses, Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel that are called to come up to the Mount of God. Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice, and said, all the words which the Lord hath said, we will do. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, rose up early in the morning, built an altar under the hill, 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. Moses took half of the blood, put it in basins, and half of the blood sprinkled on the altar. He took the book of the covenant, read it in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord hath said we will do, and be obedient. Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, behold the blood of the covenant which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words. Then went up Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. They were privy to see the God of Israel. There's a passage that says, no man shall see God and live. Moses, at the time that he was first around the Shekinah of God, wanting to see God, it says God put him in the cleft of a rock, essentially covering him, that he would only see his hinder parts, whatever that means. But here it says, Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. So an interesting spectacle that these people were privy to see, and that only happened after the blood was sprinkled. Now, there's plenty of New Testament application to be made here, but the thing I want us to focus on is I'm actually kind of zoning in on one thing here. The sons. What did they do to merit being a part, and the 70, but specifically the sons of Aaron, Nadab and Abihu? What did they do specifically to deserve this privilege? Well, it just so happens they were part of the priestly group because of their father, nephews of Israel's leader, the head of a group of chosen people. And so we have this great position and privilege given to these sons. Now, it's interesting because the whole chronicle, if you will, of Moses, of Aaron, and of the sons, specifically Nadab and Abihu, give us some insight that everybody in this particular reference I've just made will actually fall short in disobedience to God. For Moses, his shortfalling cost him the promised land. For Aaron, if you think about it, and all the things that he is implicated in came at a cost. And the price of these two sons of Aaron was immediate death for their disobedience. Now, we read in the New Testament when it says, for sin comes death, and we're referring to the specific origin, if you will. But along the way, it must be understood God gave clear instructions to each and every one of these. Please don't camp out on the idea that what they were dealing with was the law. Because Christ, when Christ comes, gives clear instructions, and whether you want to take this in the same way, many could not receive. All you need to do is go to the parable of the sower and know many could not receive the words that Christ spoke. And he spoke not of the law, he spoke of himself, and could not be received. So here I'm focusing in today on the sons and the age-old concepts that we have here. Now, the sons were given special privilege. That special privilege is outlined. You got to go to the book of Leviticus. I'm going to do a lot of reading. You got to go to the book of Leviticus to hear about their special tasks. Leviticus 8, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, take Aaron and his sons with him, and the garments, and the anointing oil, and a bullock for the sin offering, 2 rams, and a basket of unleavened bread. Gather thou all the congregation together at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Moses did as the Lord commanded him. The assembly was gathered together unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Moses said unto the congregation, this is the thing which the Lord commanded to be done. And Moses brought Aaron and his sons and washed them with water. He put upon him the coat and girded him with the girdle, clothed him with the robe, put the ephod upon him. He girded him with a curious girdle of the ephod, and bound it unto him thitherwith. He put the breastplate upon him also. Also he put in the breastplate the Urim and the Thummim. He put the mitre upon his head, also upon the mitre, even upon his forefront, did he put the golden plate, the holy crown, as the Lord commanded Moses. Here's a whole get up for the priest Aaron, the high priest to be wearing. Moses took the anointing oil, anointed the tabernacle, all that was therein, sanctified them, sprinkled thereof upon the altar 7 times, anointed the altar and all the vessels, both the laver and his foot, to sanctify them. And he poured the anointing oil upon Aaron's head and anointed him to sanctify him, to separate him, to make him separate unto the Lord. And Moses brought Aaron's sons, put 2 coats upon them, girded them with girdles, put bonnets upon them, as the Lord commanded. And he brought the bullock for the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the bullock for the sin offering. He slew it. Moses took the blood, and upon the horns of the altar, round about with his finger, purified the altar, poured the blood at the bottom of the altar, sanctified it to make reconciliation upon it. All these things that are in the tabernacle, except for one item, represent Christ or typify something about Christ, Christ-likeness, Christ-life. And, of course, the altar is no different, the altar with the blood applied to it. Verse 18, he brought the ram for the burnt offering And Aaron and his sons, each time Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the ram. He killed it, sprinkled the blood upon the altar round about, cut the ram in pieces, and so on, washed the inward parts. Then he brought the other ram, the ram of consecration. And Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the ram, and he slew it. It's a pretty bloody scene. And he brought Aaron's sons, verse 24, and Moses put of the blood upon the tip of their right ear. Now, the symbolism there, the right of anything in God's book, the right hand usually is the hand of power, the right ear representing the same concept in terms of obedience. So we have the blood being applied to their right ear, upon the thumbs of their right hands, and upon the great toes of their right feet. And I could do a whole message on just this, the ears, the hands, and the feet. And it's self-explanatory when we talk about those in the New Testament dispensation who walk in the gospel, their feet shod with the gospel of the good news, the thumbs representing their hands, obviously right hand representing the power that comes from God, and as I said, the ear, the ability to hear and be obedient unto God. In the New Testament, we might say, from Dr. Scott's teaching, running to the voice of the sayer, listening and running to the voice of the sayer. Moses sprinkled the blood upon the altar round about. And if you keep reading the rest of this chapter, everything is upon Aaron's hands and upon his son's hands. That's verse 27. In verse 30, he took the anointing oil, Moses did, and the blood which was on the altar, and sprinkled it upon Aaron and his garments, and upon his sons and his sons' garments. So they're being washed and cleansed and purified. And I again could go straight into the New Testament and say these are all portrayals or types of the activity of Christ's finished work in our lives, what Christ has done, washing and cleansing both by the blood and equally by the Spirit, the Word of God. Now, chapter 9, Leviticus, came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel, said unto Aaron, take thee a young calf for a sin offering, a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And unto the children of Israel thou shalt speak, saying, take ye a kid of the goats for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both of the first year, without blemish, for a burnt offering. And all of this, by the way, is to be offered and mingled with oil. And verse 4, the last part says, for today the Lord will appear unto you. Again, I want to say these people had privilege. They had position. And now Moses is saying, all of this being done, and today the Lord will appear unto you. And they brought that which Moses commanded before the tabernacle of the congregation. And all the congregation drew near and stood before the Lord. And Moses said, this is the thing which the Lord commanded that ye should do. And the glory of the Lord shall appear unto you. And of course they carry out the whole thing, which is a continuance in the chapter. And after they have carried out the instructions per Moses, beginning at verse 22 of the 9th chapter, it says, Aaron lifted up his hand toward the people, blessed them, came down from offering the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of the congregation and came out and blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the people. And when God said in the Old Testament, this, like the building of the tabernacle, see to it that you build it exactly according to the pattern which I have revealed to you. Why? Because changing one dimension by just a small measurement, changing any of the colors, would alter the very thing that God was trying to say. What you're building, you will see in reality, but in fact is a type of the reality which is with me in heaven, essentially is the idea. Changing anything here on earth, the things that I've told you to do, would essentially be like saying the things that I am telling you that they represent will not be what they are. They must be exactly this. So they carry out the orders, and it says, verse 24, there came a fire from before the Lord and consumed upon the altar the burnt offering and the fat. When all the people saw, they shouted and fell to their faces. Now, this is it's one of those things that when you understand the privilege, we might say, well, we're reading something that's already happened in the past, but the privilege of what God put forth is the same privilege that I just spent the first 10 minutes of my message referring to about how people take their calling, their being chosen, and their responsibility as a child of God. See, no matter how you read this, there'll be people who will read this, and they will read this as I've just described, and they'll say, well, but that's God's way of prescribing it through the law, and we're not under the law. That's right. But just because we're not under the law, does it mean that you don't have ears, that you can't listen? Or, as I've said many times, just because you have ears doesn't mean that you can hear or that you can actually take orders. I've met many people. You ever talk to somebody and you're telling them something, but they cannot hear you? They're busy talking about what they want to say. Oh, yeah, so one hand went up there, yeah. And I'm not praising the Lord right now either. I'm just telling you, I've met a lot of those people. You know, the first thing they tell you is, you can talk to me, I'm a good listener. And then when you start talking, you find out their ears must be appended to where they're sitting. Because they sure ain't hearing anything I'm saying. Okay, that'll hit you a little later. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, chapter 10, took either of them his censer, put fire therein, put incense thereon, offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. They went out, fire from the Lord devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Now, I've heard people say, that's very unjust of God. But God gave specific orders, and they took strange fire, false fire. Now, what's really important is that back in an earlier chapter, there are some instructions regarding both the fire and the incense that is to be burnt upon this. For the fire, very clearly, I'll read it to you because there's two places I need to turn to, but for the fire, it's Exodus 30, where it says, and when Aaron lighteth the lamps at even, he shall burn incense upon it, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall offer no strange incense thereon, nor burnt sacrifice, nor meat offering, neither shall ye pour drink offering. In other words, very clearly, the things that God has said, go there, and the things that don't, there's a punishment for it, much like there's to be no imitation incense. That passage is also found in the 30th chapter of Exodus, in verses 37 and 38. And as for the perfume which thou shalt make, which is the incense, to be offered on the altar where this is going to be consumed, ye shall not make to yourselves according to the composition thereof. It shall be unto thee holy for the Lord. Whosoever shall make like unto that, to smell thereto, shall even be cut off from his people. So God very clearly says, this is the way I want things done for me. Do not substitute your idea of how I want things done. Now, the altar of incense, we know, having gone through the tabernacle many times, is the place where, in analogy, the prayers of the believers, of the saints, are offered up. And the fire should be understood. If you take the whole altar, you've got what I referenced. That's why I referenced the blood being applied to the altar. You've got a clear concept that if we carry this into the New Testament, the prayers of the saints are heard through the vehicle, through the vessel, if you will, not some false fire, not some praying. I'm going to speak plainly now, probably offend some people, but especially during the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church substituted, it's just the way it is, they substituted praying to Jesus for praying to Mary, because apparently it was easier, and for a myriad number of reasons, to reach Mary than it was to reach Jesus. And because she was elevated to his status, it became equal. Now, the Bible's really clear. If you want to read it and read it to understand, and you can come in with traditions and baggage, but if you're going to read it, scales should fall off your eyes. God said this is the way to pray. And I'm sorry, Mary was just the tummy, I've called her the holy incubator. She was the human vessel for which God would bring a flesh pot for Jesus to tent in. But make no mistake about it, praying to Mary, to my Catholic friends, I challenge you to find it in here, where one ought to pray to Mary to receive. Now, you want to talk about false fire and the way of doing something with God. God then, through the course of time, as it was planned, by the way, to reconcile man back, Christ is come in the flesh, and suddenly Christ, speaking with authority, not as the scribe, says, it's through me. I am the door. I am the way. You want to have some different way in? John 10 talks about being a thief and a robber. There's only one door, and he says, I'm it. Now, I don't know how you could misinterpret that, but there are still many people who will say, well, it's equally good. No, there's a strange fire. In this particular instance, we're talking about the two sons who knew better, who saw. And what's so terrible is that you can just say, okay, this is my example out of the Old Testament. But the problem is that we, in our time, can just read by this and not see this could have several applications. First is failure to really read this book and understand what is at the heart of what's being said. You know, the age-old argument where people talk about, and you've heard this, you've heard it out of my mouth, you've heard people argue it, to tithe or not to tithe, because tithing is the law, and God said the law is done away with in Christ, and I've told you, they miss the whole principle. If you're not willing to look at something deeper, and those people that argue that are seldom the people who are coming into the church each and every Sunday or sending in offerings weekly that surpass what they would have technically tithed. Does that make sense to you? Because they find every argument against giving, period. One fellow we know, he says, well, we don't do tithes and offerings. We put up a board at the front. I don't care. Listen, there's a time when you just got to put it out there and you got to say it like it is. And we put a board at the front, and when the church has a bill, they stick it there and somebody will pay it. I'm sorry, did that work anywhere here? I don't think so. But this is the idea. And, listen, people will argue about this, but I'm going to say strange fire here first can be emotional fervor. People who are operating strictly on, you've met them. I feel the Lord. I feel, and they'll tell you about their, and it's wonderful to have feelings, but if it's strictly emotional fervor, it's strange fire to God, because he's looking for the heart to be changed as he reaches in and does what only he can do. And yes, there will be emotion, of course, but it cannot be based on that. Or those people who hinge their whole universe on activity and works, or self-glorying. Now these Nadab and Abihu, let's look at their act for a minute. It says they took either of them his censer, put fire therein, put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. They knew. But they knew. There's other elements to this which are later on in this chapter, which I'm not interested in getting into today, because I'm looking for something specific, which is meaningless form of going through the motions and substituting what you think is acceptable, or what I think is acceptable, to God. You ever heard people say, well, you just got to do your best. Just try, do your best. Now, I'm not saying that doing your best isn't good, but God will take your heart, listening to his word, and your frailty and falling down in the process, versus just doing your best. Does that make sense? Yes. Good, because I don't want anybody here to leave with any doubt of what I'm saying, because the spirit of complacency and the danger that we all face being children of God, just like this here, these two boys, Nadab and Abihu, who had privilege, they had position. You have and I have privilege and position. That doesn't mean we're granted to lord it over other people and say, hey, I'm so-and-so in the church. We're talking about your position, your placement, each individual before God. And I've told you, I said this last week in a different way, never forget the pit from which you were hewn, but at the same time recognize, just like Joshua standing and being accused with dirty garments, and here, give him clean clothes, and his clothes are now festive garments. We come with filthy, dirty rags before God, and he cleanses us, and he makes us. He washes us. He cleanses us. So, got a lot of people that they think their position, well, I'm a child of God. That's lip service when the state or condition starts to be a moving away from. Listen, just because, let's go to the flesh, because it might be a little bit clear. In the flesh, your child moves out at 18 or 20 or 21, 26, 35. Your child moves out. Just because your child moves away doesn't make your child not your child anymore. Your child can be living under your roof till whatever the age and act like a jerk and not be your child right under your own roof. So it's that same idea. Now, I think these two had clarity with all the privilege that they had. They saw God. They were given the Old Testament version of what happens in the New Testament on the Mount of Transfiguration, with the few select that were given to go up with Jesus on the Mount, and they saw what they perceived was Elijah and Moses, and Peter says, let's build 3 tabernacles here, one for you, Jesus, one for Elijah, and one for Moses. Don't be mistaken. These had the privilege of seeing, and it says, and they saw God. Now, you can do whatever you want with that, but their act was fearless presumption. You know, when you think it just doesn't matter how I do it, as long as I do it, I just need to get it done. Now, most of you have heard the story, and when I first heard it, I thought, wow, geez, that's tough right there. That's a tough boss. Dr. Scott used to tell the story of a guy that used to work for him up in Orville. And he'd fill up a can of nuts and bolts. You know the story, right? And tell him to sort them out, and put them back in the container and dump them out and tell the guy to sort them again. You know, I would say, what'd you do that for? You know, it probably took the guy 5 hours to sort the stuff out. But the point is, those details matter, and learning about those details with God. I often lament some of the people right around me, closest to me, and some of them maybe don't know the Bible as well. But I often think of things that are done. You know, sometimes I've said, gosh, I wish I had whatever it is, and somebody will rush out and get it for me. And I feel just like David, like it's almost too holy that person went out and did that for me. What do you say about that? But then there are those people who, they don't care. You could say, they won't even say, oh, here. They won't even offer you, I know radio people, I just offered somebody a bottle of water. They won't even do that. Not even listening. You could be having a heart attack in front of them and they'd still be going on about their business. Still talking. So my point is, these two represent something for us that's very important. There, as I said, willful disobedience. They knew better. Now, the book of Hebrews says if we sin willfully, speaking of those who refuse to acknowledge, once they have come to the knowledge of the forgiving, saving grace of Christ. If we sin willfully, there remaineth no more remission for sin, meaning don't Don't come into the realm like these that the letter of the Hebrews was written to say, oh, it doesn't matter. Seeing that you crucify Christ afresh over and over and over and over and over and over. This is what Paul was saying in Romans 6. If grace abounds, essentially, why not sin all the more? God forbid. So these, as I put them, bullet points, their punishment. Think about this. They're struck dead right there. It says there went out from fire from the Lord. The very fire, because the fire was holy that they were to use, the very fire and the, as I said, imitation incense is just as bad as imitation fire. The very thing that they were to use that was holy and apart is the very thing that killed them. I want you to think on that for a minute, because that might be the most profound thing I say in my lifetime. We seldom think of that. The very thing, the design of our salvation, the design of coming to, that I may know him, and then people turn away. Don't forget, there's some deeper things here going on, some other lessons in here. But probably the most important thing that I see is meaningless form, the motions of something. It looks like, but it is not. Now listen, this is not a message that you might say, well, the point is quite profound, I think. Because see, this is not just an event here of substituting and deciding, and the consequences are pretty heavy. God just consumed him with fire. But I want you to think about this, because there are many people in this book who had a spirit of disobedience. They were God's people, but they had a spirit of disobedience, and they would not obey, knowing that something should have been done. God set forth a pattern, and there's plenty of them. I wrote a few in my margin right here. I mean, obviously, the reference I made to Moses is pretty plain. God told Moses the second time to speak to the rock, not to strike it. And Moses, being stirred up, the second time he struck, or it says he smote the rock, that God said, speak to it. You and I might think, oh, come on. But I don't think Moses was saying, oh, come on, when God said, for that, I'll let you go up and look into the promised land, but you're not entering. Now, we know the grace of God. We know that there had to be something more happen with Moses, as it says they were forces fighting over his body. And later on, the appearance, as I mentioned, in the Mount of Transfiguration, he appears there. There's a great depiction of God's grace at work. That's not like, oh, well, you messed up one time, so you're out. It doesn't work like that. But Moses was given that responsibility. And he could have, and did, by the way. It was the people that drove him to that. He blamed the people for that. And the blame game, by the way, of disobedience goes far and way back. It's the woman you gave me. Right? It's the woman you gave. That's how it works. We are so eager to push it off on somebody else and make it somebody else's fault. I'll tell you this one thing. If we could ever come to this, and the sooner, the better. And I'm speaking to people as believers, but I'm speaking to people as human beings. If we could ever come to the place of not blaming somebody else, although these Nadab and Abihu didn't have an opportunity to blame somebody else. God just eradicated that right there in that moment. But most of these people found an opportunity to blame somebody else instead of saying, it's me. I'm the one. Now, Moses is one. Obviously, there are other people. Eli comes to mind, and the sons of Eli, because it says the sons of Eli were the sons of Belial. And Eli knew that he should have done something to discipline his sons who knew better, but instead he let it be. There's a whole series of these people in the Bible. I love that, because what it tells me is that these are given as warning signs. It doesn't mean, I think, somehow when you come into walking with the Lord, you're going to walk perfectly and you're never going to mess up. I'm not saying that. Please do not misconstrue. What I'm saying is it's very easy to substitute your way, your thinking, your thought process, even how you pray. This altar of incense episode representing the way we pray. And how many times I've gone to places where it's been, people reading off of little cards because they think that's the way you ought to pray. Out of the belly, what comes out of your mouth and the earnestness and the desire cannot just be, now I'm going to spew all this out, because the altar is the place where this blood is applied. In other words, when you bring your petitions, you bring them through the blood of Christ. They're brought with that. It's not something that's just, I'm over here and that's over there. The mindset is, this is the doorway. This is how we make intercession and how we pray. And you've got a whole host of people substituting in the Bible. The book of Malachi is a whole record of people who knew better, by the way. These are the priests substituting their bad sacrifices and their bad offerings, flawed. God will never know the difference. We're supposed to give one without blemish, but this one, it's got a little bit of a bad leg. We'll offer that one. No one will ever know. And God's looking down saying, really? And how many people treat the church like that and treat their responsibility and their commitments like that? No one will ever know. No one will ever know that I didn't make it to church today. No one will ever know that I haven't paid my tithes and offerings in 6 months because there's so many people. No one will ever know. Well, if you're doing it for that reason, not real bright, because the thing that God placed in your heart at the start, that's between you and God. You don't think God's looking on the heart? We read these things selectively. Psalm 139, my down sittings, my uprisings, my thoughts are far. Well, if that's true, then he also knows when you're cheating him. Think about that. And here are these people who knew exactly what to do and did not do it. And I keep going back to this one thing. It's what Samuel said to Saul. Obedience is better than sacrifice, and rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. I think there are way too many people that come into the church at large and think, well, I'll just do it my way. I kind of get the gist of what's said here. I'll do it my way. And my way is a little bit better than no way at all, right? Isn't that the definition of sin? All we like sheep. I'll do what I want to do, how I want to do it. And I'm up here telling you something that don't just think I'm standing here sermonizing you again. It's the very thing that I'm trying to reach for, which I've been striving for these last few weeks without even knowing it until it became clear to me. This is a very important thing right here. People who come to the knowledge of what their privilege is in Christ is like somebody saying, I know that I was swept up in that storm drain, being caught away if it wasn't for the one who came to rescue me. You never forget that event. You never forget the one who rescued you. You walk around all the days of your life and you marvel at the fact that you should have been dead, but... And then, as I said, you come back to how things are treated. The psalmist wisely says, let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Not forgetting the essence, the content, the meaning, and not just having some form and going through some motion of doing something. It's like people gather for church. Let's do church. Let's have church. And we gather in the building, and we're all seated here, and okay, it's almost time for the message to be over, and the offering will come again, and they'll sing the song, and then we'll file out, and we've done our little box checking. But I wonder how many people came into the church today saying, I really need to stop the slide back, and I need to move forward again. I need to not be looking at the things as these. I've kind of made the motion of it. This should make some people just a little bit uncomfortable. Some of you look like you're a little bored, and some of you look a little uncomfortable. Because the reality is, this is germane to each and every one of us. The possibility of having the complacency, it's no big deal, forgetting about the privilege and the position that we're given. and just going through it with some meaningless form. And I could pick from anywhere. I could bring you into the New Testament and talk to you about Ananias and Sapphira and say they thought there's a way to go through the motions. Didn't take very long for the Holy Spirit to smoke that out to where both husband and wife, in a matter of just a short, brief period, are struck dead. Lying and cheating God. So if you think this is only an Old Testament story, it should be something that's taken to heart, that God looks at. He doesn't ask us to be perfect because we can't. He doesn't say perform because our performance would be failure. It would be will worship, be an act of I will do this thing. But hearing and taking the words to heart. Why do you think, I reference Solomon many times, why do you think it's such a powerful thing that God many times over said to not intermarry and to not go after strange women? And it's the one thing, well, maybe not the one thing, but it's the thing that brought him down. It was his demise. So if you think about it, God's always emphasizing something for a purpose. And there are many other references I could make. I could say to you, we have the passage of the rich young ruler who comes to Christ, and what must I do? And he says, sell all that you have and give it to the poor and follow me. And he went away very sorrowful. Why? Because he had many things, but he wasn't willing to do the one thing that Christ had asked him. For that man, it was to sell his things. For each of us, there is something that God will one day ask or require. It'll be put on your heart. You probably won't hear it audibly. If you do, let me know. Can you hear me now? But for each individual, only you know what that is. And for each and every one of us, you can say, I heard, but then I just go about my business. And there are consequences to that. And I would be a fool to stand here and say that there are not. Now, I've said, luckily, we live in a dispensation of grace. We are forgiven. We can always come back to God over and over as long as we get up and we point in the right direction. We're not being presumptuous and saying, well, I can't go again. Yes, you can. God says this is the abundant forgiveness that we have. Just don't be mistaken about something. These people, Nadab and Abihu, they had been granted the position, the power, the privilege, and yet decided it wasn't that important. And as long as they were going through the motions thereof, that bottom line is maybe it was to be seen, maybe it was enough in their minds that close was good enough with God. Well, if you want to play horseshoes, that's your prerogative. Now, how does this apply to you and to me? Very simple. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, he shall also reap. I'm not using that passage strictly in the sense of giving, because I could. That comes right after Paul teaching the people about being taught in the Word. But I'm talking as a bigger principle. And I'm speaking to you now as a sister in Christ, as a person who at times would like to tell some of you, there are people that come into the church that are so injured from life and living in the world, they can never shake off the goodness of the Lord. Taste and see that the Lord is good. I've tasted of this good and wonderful bread, and it's the bread I desire because it's the bread that satisfies me, and I desire no other bread. I'm speaking of Christ. And then there are those who are satisfied with imitation bread because they do not desire that. They're not hungry for that. That's another form of false fire. I don't think I have that here. I think that gets smoked out very quickly. People come in, and the ones that came in looking for entertainment and the ones that came in looking for something else, they leave quickly because they weren't looking for bread, the manna from God. They were looking for something else. By the way, I say it again. What's the point of coming into the church? The church is a people who belong to the Lord, supposedly called out from among those who weren't called. What's the point of coming into the church if you can't leave here today knowing a little bit more of the heart of God through His Word? What's the point? John 17, this is life eternal, that they may know Thee. All of the scriptures that I constantly reference have something to do with the fact that coming to a greater and fuller knowledge of the heart of God. It doesn't mean that you will strive to be and you will become and you will do, because I really do believe the fruit of the Spirit working in a believer is constantly, it's a constant, there's growth and there's the seasons of pruning and what is taken away that is unprofitable. Not you taking it away, it's God that does that. God is doing all of that. And as long as you're not just going through the motions and coasting, well, doesn't it count if I just show up? Well, all I'm going to tell you is it will matter much, my responsibility, as I believe the same thing that I'm telling you about your walk, God is doing for me in my pulpit, which is actually his pulpit, which is to be careful as he is with us and around us, and I believe guides me, to not get into preaching the things that tantalize and the things that are always, oh, I want to hear about this, but rather, what do we need to hear that will bring us into a corrective mode to make sure we are not falling into complacency and going through the motions. And that is the whole gestalt of this whole message, to say the examples are abundant. And you can read the Bible and find a plethora of these people who thought close was good enough. And I'm telling you that you want to get close to God and keep your ears open and run to the things that are being said. Run towards those things being said for your betterment, for you as hearers, those who are listening, to receive those words. And those words are put in your heart, and they become a meditation of the heart, that when you pray again and ask God to help you, God, help me to not make this casual. Even that approach to God in the mind is like going and looking at the layout of the tabernacle and seeing that altar of incense and seeing the blood being applied afresh and the fire that comes from God and the things that, as John in Revelation sees, the prayer of the saints ascending as incense, by the way. To not forget the way of sacrifice, not mine, but his, that the way in which you do things is important with God. God's not looking for people to imitate and to emulate and to try and, you can say whatever you want, but some who have not combed through the Kempis imitation of Christ, many people who have gone through and said, well, this is the way a Christian must, and they'll fill in the blanks. And I'd say to you, what I've said now, I believe, all of these years, be authentically you in Christ, but let God do the work like you are clay on the potter's wheel. Let him mold and fashion you, that you may become more like the image and likeness of Christ, more of him, less of me. And that can only happen instead of going through the form and meaningless form, searching for the lesson and taking it into the heart and not being so full of pride to say, I can't accept that because I will not. No. Lord, I desire, and I speak for me, to be conformed to your image more and more, and I know that I cannot do it. And I don't want this time here to be meaningless form and a meaningless sermon with some meaningless words, and then you just leave here. You leave here and go about your business, but rather that something take root today from this passage that says, I get it. I want to have the value of my worship count for something, and it is there, that striking of the chord that says the fire that should be kindled inside. The burning desire to press closer, to desire the things of God and not say, oh, I had a little taste of that taste and see, and it tasted good, but I'm good now, I'm satisfied. We used to sing a song here, fill my cup, Lord, fill it up, Lord. And if you think about it, come and bless, there's the desires that are in here for you, come and bless that. And when that is awakened, complacency moves far, far away. And the drive to committedness, which is the thing that I'm wanting from those listening today, I'm not kidding you when I say I really do believe what the Bible says. The under-shepherds, here are those who are preaching the Word of God will give account. I will give account not just for me personally, but I will give account of my stewardship. What I stood here to give you instruction. Did I give you instruction for your soul and for the changing, for the benefit to press you and to drive you to Christ and to His Word, or did I make you feel good and massage you with smooth words and you left here and the flesh was satisfied? You figure out which one you prefer, because I know the one I do. I like the sound of getting a little back massage now and then because it feels so good, but I'd rather have that, which is food for the soul, that drives me back to the book, that gives me that check in my mind. It's very easy to grab for strange fire, but it's even easier when the fire has been lit inside to stay the course with the fire of God that's been given and live by that fire and take that as the compass to keep me from the complacency in my commitments and to quit the idea somehow that meaningless form or going through the motions is going to cut it with God. As your pastor, and I said as a child of God and a sister in the Lord, I don't want that for you, and I sure don't want it for me. So if you hear what I'm saying, it's time for some of you to get a real clear picture. It matters to God. Get your heart in gear, your mind in gear, and let's start afresh today, just like it's the first day of the rest of your life. Get up and walk with the Lord like it's a new beginning, because it is. That's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.